we've got about a month to fill time until we get to WrestleMania 41. So got to figure out something to talk about. And I said, you know what? I've been thinking about it, and I'm sure other people have done this type of topic before, very similar, almost the exact same. So this is not anything new, but yeah, I was thinking about over the years, what are some of the matches that I would have loved to have seen at WrestleMania that we never got? The WrestleMania matches that should have happened but never did, and most cases never fucking will. And that's what brought me here to this video, 15 WrestleMania matches that should have happened. Now, a couple of ground rules for this one is this is not, like just matches against featuring people from different eras that never crossed paths in the company at the same time, blah, 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 right? Obviously, since we're saying they should have happened, this means that these matches, they never met one-on-one at WrestleMania. So there's a piece. Another qualifier I try to put on this too is to say, as much as I could, and I think there's only one variance here, each wrestler could only featured once. Because I could have sat there and said, well, we never got Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan versus John Cena, Hulk Hogan versus Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan versus, you get the point, right? Or you could do a similar exercise with Stone Cold Steve Austin, or perhaps a similar exercise with The Rock. What I'm saying is, like, I tried to mix it up a little bit so it wasn't biased so much towards one or two wrestlers, because you literally could do that with just a couple of wrestlers and still have a pretty outstanding list of, damn, I wish that match would have fucking happened. But here we are, and this is my list, like, matches that in my opinion should have happened, and if you like it, great, and if you don't, fuck you. Let's go. 15 WrestleMania matches that should have happened in reverse order from 15 all the way up to number 1. Number 15, Ultimate Warrior versus Sid Vicious. Why would that be anybody's dream matchup? Why wouldn't that be anybody's fucking dream matchup? Having those two muscle-bound, raging psychopaths facing off one-on-one like, say, at WrestleMania 8 would have been fucking epic. Goddamn right that match should have happened at WrestleMania. I can't believe it never worked out, and it never did. Number 14, Macho Man Randy Savage versus Bret Hart. Man, this would have been fantastic to see around like a WrestleMania 9 or shit, even a WrestleMania 10, right? Somewhere in that area. But Macho Man was there for years. At the same time that Bret Hart was there for years. There was plenty of overlap. This feels like a match that should have happened at WrestleMania at some point. And it just never did. Now, I could have said the same thing for like Macho Man and Shawn Michaels, Macho Man and Taker. Bottom line is I wanted to get Macho Man on this list in some way as a singles wrestler. And I also wanted to get Bret Hart on this list as a singles wrestler. Because I'm sure a lot of people would say, well, they would have loved to have seen Bret Hart versus Kurt Angle. I totally understand and appreciate that. However, they didn't really overlap in terms of their WWF/E runs, right? Savage and Hart did, so I went with them. Number 13, Kurt Angle versus Mr. Perfect. You could have possibly done this in 2002 WrestleMania 18 time, right after Kurt Hennig had come back. Like this would have been a fucking amazing match. And this is one of those ones, like, again, you talk about the Kurt Angle and the Bret Hart. Give me Kurt Angle versus Mr. Perfect. That should have happened. Found a way for that to happen, especially before Mr. Perfect had his unfortunate passing just like a year after that. Number 12, Trish Stratus versus Lita. I know they wrestled in a triple threat match against each other in Jazz back at like WrestleMania 18 or so, but they never faced off one-on-one at WrestleMania. Did they? I don't recall it. For the two divas, if you will, that were at the top of their era for a period of time, and they represented that era in a lot of ways, they should have had a one-on-one featured match at WrestleMania when it mattered, and they never did. And even then, I'm like, whatever. That's still in the women's matches were the piss break era, but had to put the ladies in here at some point, so there you fucking go. Number 11, Eddie Guerrero versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. If you could have found a way to make this work somewhere between 2002 and 2005, this still could have worked brilliantly, beautifully, even with Ricky Steamboat being older. We saw what he did a few years later, you know, when he had that match against Chris Jericho at 25. Would have loved to have seen Eddie Guerrero and Ricky Steamboat tear the fucking house down at a WrestleMania, because I sure as hell know they could have. We never got to see them face off like that in a WWE ring, which is really, really sad. Number 10, Jeff Hardy versus Shawn Michaels. Like, it kind of writes itself in a lot of ways, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It does. There are tons of similarities there. Some differences too, but some similarities. And you could have really made this work in the 2008-2009 era when Jeff Hardy was at the top, and you could have had Shawn Michaels play the like petty, pissed off, bitter old man that hates that somebody that idolized him and looked up to him is now taking a spot that used to belong to him. Like, this shit could have worked, and they could have absolutely torn the house down at WrestleMania. Yeah, it sucks that a match like that never happened one-on-one at Mania. Number 9. Admittedly, it feels like it's a little high on this list for me, but you know, I'm also I gotta admit, like, the fact that CM Punk and Daniel Bryan never faced off at one-on-one at a WrestleMania feels like a real drop of the ball and a real missed fucking opportunity. Like, these are guys that had history. These are guys that had name. These are guys that you did a lot of things with in WWE, and you never found a way to have these two face off one-on-one at WrestleMania. Like, it's a really bad habit of WWE over the years of missing opportunities to get the biggest money matches possible. CM Punk and Daniel Bryan would have been a big money match for the type of fan base that would have appealed to. It would have had enough to it for other fans to give a shit about. Can't believe they never did it. Just like number 8. While they did the match, they didn't do it at WrestleMania. That's the Shield versus the Wyatt family. You had two incredibly hot factions at the time. If I recall correctly, in 2014, they squared off at Elimination Chamber, and that match was so much of what people wanted, but you couldn't hold that shit off until Mania? You couldn't have these two teams face off until WrestleMania? Like, that was the type of feud, the type of match with the talent and investment that had been put into it that almost commanded and demanded that it be paid off at a WrestleMania. It's insane to me that that never happened. Number 7, Goldberg versus Stone Cold. Again, with Stone Cold, you could say Hogan. That would be a big one. Triple H. That would be a big one. You could maybe go Mankind. You could technically go Taker. Like, there's a lot of different options here where you could go with Stone Cold in that he never faced somebody one-on-one at WrestleMania. But I'll go with Goldberg because back in the 90s, you know, they were badasses in their own ways. Bald head, goatees, like all of that shit. And this was a type of fantasy matchup that people would talk about 25 plus years ago. And anybody that sits there and says that's not true is full of shit. They absolutely did. I lived during that time. I remember it because I used to think about it too. So it sucks, like in the 2000s when both guys were in the company at the same time, you couldn't have found a way to get it done, but it's just the nature of the beast. On number 6, I'll go the Hart Foundation versus the Rockers. You know, so now I've got Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, not only in a singles match, but also a tag match. But yeah, like as a fucking kid, I would have loved to have seen these two teams square off at WrestleMania. It's a shame that it never happened. You know, there's all types of different tag matches you could go with. But I'm also trying to think about times where teams and talent actually overlapped. It's not pure just fantasy, but like realistically could have happened in some way. This one could have happened. It never did, and it sucks that it never did. Number 5, and this is a big one, and this one just stood out to me because I can't believe this never fucking happened. Brock Lesnar versus Batista. Never happened at WrestleMania. How in the fuck these two guys that came up through the same OVW system at the same fucking time that became big stars for WWE, even if you're talking about later in their careers when Batista's off making movies and doing part-time appearances, the fact that you couldn't find a way to get these two to square off at a WrestleMania is absolutely insane to me. Just a major drop of the ball and a huge missed opportunity in my opinion. Like, imagine putting on the marquee for WrestleMania, Brock Lesnar versus Batista. I promise you people would give a fuck. They would absolutely give a fuck. Number 4. This one's got to stand out because all the times these guys wrestled, They never wrestled one-on-one at WrestleMania. And you're thinking I'm going to talk about one pairing, and I'm not. I'm talking about Triple H versus The Rock. And I know what you're going to say. Well, they technically were part of that four-way title match at WrestleMania 2000, which sunk donkey dick. But we didn't get that one-on-one match. And what I'm talking about more is like later in their career, as like purely egomaniacs, uncles at the barbecue talking shit about 10, 15 years ago and who won in one-on-one and that type of shit. Like that's the fucking, I wanted to see mid-2010s Triple H versus mid-2010s Rock. It's a shame that never fucking happened. Sure, you could say WrestleMania 2000 should have just been Triple H versus The Rock or Triple H versus Mankind. It should have been one of them, right? But it wasn't. But at some point in time, to never have Triple H and The Rock face off one-on-one at WrestleMania just feels like a huge drop ball opportunity, just like it was with Triple H and Stone Cold. Can't believe that never happened one-on-one at WrestleMania. And then we get to number 3, and you know which one this is. It doesn't matter how many times they wrestled over the years at other pay-per-views. The fact is, at the Showcase of the Immortals, they never faced off one-on-one, mano-a-mano, doing their own individual Breakfast Club business. And of course, I'm talking about John Cena versus Randall Keith Orton that apparently we're never going to fucking get. Hashtag once in a lifetime. Hashtag this time it counts. Hashtag, couldn't you just give this one fucking thing to me, WWE? But yeah, like, this one will really stand out as people think about 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road. They're going to say, you had these two guys that were the faces of a decade of this company's history, and they never once faced at WrestleMania. Meanwhile, you look, Hogan faced Andre at WrestleMania, Hogan faced Savage at WrestleMania, Hogan faced Warrior at WrestleMania, Hogan faced the fucking Rock at WrestleMania later on, right? Austin and Rock faced off 3 different times at WrestleMania. Rock and Cena wrestled twice at WrestleMania. But you're telling me somewhere over all those fucking years you couldn't figure out a way to book yourself into a position where you would have John Cena and Randy Orton square off one-on-one at WrestleMania? Like, it feels like one of the dumbest booking decisions ever. It does, right? And even those that are going to say, well, so many of their matches weren't great and you saw them wrestle so many times. Yeah, it was all stupid, right? And one of the big reasons it was fucking stupid is because it never built up to a big-time one-on-one match at WrestleMania between the two of them. And it looks like we're never going to fucking get that, and that's a damn shame. Number 2, Sting versus The Undertaker explicitly at WrestleMania 27. This was a match that was rumored. You felt like it was coming. It seemed like it could be finally happening, and then it didn't. And it was just a missed opportunity. And we could put all the spin on it around. Would it have lived up to the hype? Would it have lived up to the expectation? Look, it would have been Sting finally showing up in WWE. And the first thing he wants to do, he wants to go after The Undertaker and The Undertaker streak at WrestleMania. And as shitty as a show at WrestleMania 27 ultimately ended up being, you're telling me that Undertaker and Sting wouldn't have found a way to steal the show? You're out of your fucking mind. Yeah, that's one of those, we'll never get it, and it freaking sucks that we never will. But I still think number 1 on this list, it has to be Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair at WrestleMania 8. You have, at the time, arguably the 2 biggest stars in the industry, 2 of the absolute biggest stars of all time. And you got Ric Flair walking in talking about he's the real world's champion. And you can't figure out a way to make this work for WrestleMania 8 at the Hoosier Dome? What the fuck is wrong with you, Vince? I don't care about the spin they put on it. Well, they did some house show matches and they didn't work well. It's Hulk Hogan. It's Ric Flair. You'll figure out a way to make this shit fucking work. Like, over 30 years later, it still looks absolutely stupid and ridiculous that you had these 2 guys in the peaks of their career, at the height of their power, and you decided to go in a different direction at WrestleMania 8 to only then watch as both would later go to WCW a couple years later. And Ted Turner made sure when Hogan came there, that was the first fucking match he had, he was going to face off against Ric Flair. Shame on Vince and the WWE for letting that one get away. And that's why, to me, that is the biggest example of a WrestleMania match that should have happened but never will. You can feel free to tell me in the comments which one of these match placements you agree with, disagree with, which matches you might have listed that I did not, and which one to you is ultimately the number one WrestleMania match that should have happened but never happened and never will.